Hello, and thank you for joining the Royal Buzz, your go to podcast that's buzzworthy on pageantry, advocacy, and positivity. Where hype meets hype, listen to the magic one story at a time. Get ready for a heart touching and empowering episode of the Royal Buzz, where Missy, mama to 10-year-old Jax, shares her mission to save lives through blood stem cell advocacy, rare disease awareness, and a power of a mother's love and determination. Hello, I'm the host, Trina Myers, Miss Elite United USA, the Zebra Queen, Legacy Maker, CEO of Rare Wish, and Queen Bee of Creative Marketing Agency. And today I have a special guest with me. Welcome, Missy, aka Jax's mama. Jax, who is 10 years old and has a rare life-threatening disease. His mother, Missy, is the founder of a grassroots organization where they campaign to get people to join the National Blood Stem Cell Registry and diversify the donor drive so all people have a second chance at life. She's also the executive director of the IPEX Foundation, where their mission is to raise awareness and provide families who are navigating this rare disease the resources they need to support their son and their family financially, emotionally, and physically. She's also a school psychologist by trade and a fierce advocate for getting humans what they need when they need it. So welcome, Missy. What an accomplishment for a rare caregiver. Oh, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, today we promised our listeners that they're going to leave feeling moved, motivated, and mindful of the power of what your love has done to change lives and giving hope to families who are fighting rare diseases. So I would love to just jump right in since we gave a little bit of an introduction of who you are. I would love to learn a little bit more about yourself and Jax and his rare disease journey.
Sure. Well, Jax is 10, like you had mentioned, and he has a little brother named Lincoln. And we are just a little family of four with my husband, Pete, and we live in a small town. And 4 years ago in October, Jax was diagnosed with an incredibly rare, life threatening autoimmune disorder called IPEX. When he was diagnosed with IPEX, they sat us down. I'll never forget what the room smelled like. I'll never forget
Wow.
where I was. I will never, it's like ingrained in my memories for life.
Sure.
Yeah, I was actually at work when they called. So prior to that October of 2021, Jax had faced some pretty catastrophic medical events from 2.5 to that time. And we couldn't figure out why. I knew something was not right, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks had told me along the way that it was just bad luck, but the number of times Jax almost lost his life was just too many to count for somebody. It's starting at 2.5 to 6, 7. He shouldn't have faced that many catastrophic medical events. So we had done a little tiny blood work, and they said, I will never forget. They were like, well, we'll do this blood work and we don't think it's going to amount to anything, but we're going to send it off for a genetic panel and we'll see what
Mm-hmm.
comes back. Well,
Right.
in October of 2021, they called and they wouldn't talk to me over the phone. They just wanted to sit me down and talk to me
Sure.
over a Zoom link. Sure. So I knew it was not good. And I actually thought they were going to tell me that he had cancer. And when I got on, I was by myself. My husband was at home with the boys and they were crying. And I knew that it was not good at that point. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
he has IPEX and it's a life threatening autoimmune disorder. And they said, but don't Google it. And I said, but why am I not going to Google it? And they said, because we want you to know everything before you Google, because when you go to the internet, the research isn't good.
Yeah.
And I said, just cut to the chase. Is he dying?
Right.
And And they said yes. And they said the only known cure at this moment is a blood stem cell transplant. And I said, a transplant? And they said, yes. And they said, but we have more news. And I said, I hope it's better. And they said, not really. Jax, because of his diverse background, does not have any matches on the National Blood Stem Cell Registry. And I was,
Mm.
so we had this potential thought to be treatment, but he wasn't even eligible for that. So we talked about troubleshooting, what we could do. And essentially, it up to that point was we're just going to treat symptoms because we have nothing to
Sure.
treat him with. And that started me to wonder what else could I do? Because prior to this point, I had been very quiet about Jax's medical journeys. People knew that he had type 1 diabetes, but I didn't share that with everybody.
Hmm.
And I hadn't shared all of the other things that we had experienced because I felt like it was just a private thing between my family and I and Jax,
Sure.
really. But at that moment, I realized I needed far more than just my husband and my littlest Lincoln in this battle. And I decided to create the grassroots organization, Be the Match for Jack. And that our mission was twofold, and my
Hmm.
mission will always be twofold with everything I do. Not only is it going to be for Jax, but this is going to help support other people in need. And I thought there's going to be a lot of families who don't feel like they have a voice,
Right.
and I have a big one. So I have a loud voice, and I'm going to use it for the good of not only Jax, but for everybody else. And so I rallied a very close friends of mine, and we coined Be the Match for Jax, and we started canvassing all over the United States, in Mexico and Puerto Rico, trying to diversify the donor registry.
Wow. That is a lot. And, just even as a mother, your everyday mother duties, your everyday, like you said, you're a psychologist, just your everyday things. And then all of a sudden, everything changes for you.
Within one phone call, 1 hour, one day, it all changed in the blink of an eye.
Right. Now, I also have a rare immune deficiency. It's a little different. Mine's underactive instead of overactive. And I receive monthly plasma donations to give me
Mm.
an artificial immune system. Is that something that is also beneficial for Jax?
Actually, it is. So we use IVIG. So most,
Yes.
yep, most
Yeah.
IPEX boys are on IVIG because it regulates their immune systems.
Right.
Everybody gets it at a little bit of a different pace. Jax gets a very high dose, but only every 9 weeks.
Uh-huh.
It was every 4 weeks, and so he's made some gains in terms of stabilizing his immune system, and that's because
Right.
of some of the other things that we've done for him. But yes, we do IVIG. And I should say IPEX only affects boys. Female mothers pass it on to their male sons.
That is so interesting. So, not only does he need the stem cell, but also plasma is also in a dire need. I just came across a statistic. I believe it said 130 donations needed for one plasma treatment. And, I get mine every 4 weeks. And I can definitely tell a difference. That last week leading up to my infusions, I feel weak. And I always joke, I have a port for mine. And I say it's my Tesla. And the plasma is my battery. It just gives me that little extra boost.
Yep. Well, it's funny
So,
because Jax has type 1 diabetes and some other autoimmune disorders, all because of IPEX. So what IPEX does is it triggers the body to attack itself. So his body's always at war. And when a virus comes in, it will kill that virus and then whatever's around it. So his pancreas was
uh,
first to be impacted. And then he has myasthenia gravis. It affected his eye. Yeah.
yes, I'm familiar with that, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, and he was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis at age 5, and that was what the scale tipped in terms of we this is not typical, right? This isn't a typical response. But the interesting thing is I have IPEX, but because I'm a female with two X's and only one part of one X is what we would say diseased, I never will show symptoms of IPEX.
Wow.
So almost every female on my side has IPEX, and Jax is the first male to show symptoms. He's the first male impacted in our family.
It's really interesting when you think about genetics. I was the first one in my family to be diagnosed.
Mm,
And then later on, we discovered that my father also had a rare immune deficiency, was different than mine. And then my daughter also has the same thing, but is a little different too. So over the three generations, it drastically changed. So it's really interesting how that affects boys.
yes. Yes. And so we had to assure that my littlest Lincoln did not have IPEX. That's pretty common. So, I mean, it was a 50% chance if you think about, just genetics in general and the science behind that. So we had to we had to evaluate Lincoln both if he had IPEX and if he was a match for Jax, and he was only a 25% match. So that was not a viable solution, but he didn't have IPEX. And so I always say, how can I celebrate that he doesn't have IPEX?
Right.
You know,
Right.
it was just one checkbox on the list of many things that we were then kind of catapulted into thinking and planning for.
Sure. Now, just to take a step back, I want to get to know a little bit more about Jax before we talk a little bit more about the diagnosis and the treatment.
Sure.
So, tell us a little bit about Jax. Can you describe him for us so that our audience can kind of get an idea of what kind of sweet boy this Jax is?
Jax has been verbose since he was, I felt, born. He is funny, he's articulate, he's very observant. Our neighbor always said that he believes that Jax is going to be a negotiator for the United Nations. He's got his hands moving and he's just telling the story. He's a huge storyteller. He loves to be outdoors, he loves to ride his bike. Both him and his brother Lincoln are very into cars and vehicles. We were in California for a while. They were taking note of every car from, we would see Bugattis. We're looking at all the big souped up trucks, they call it. I mean, they're just so into vehicles. He has such an interesting little view, but he's always happy. And I he's been through so much. And every day, he just wakes up with a smile. Every day, it's like he's elated to be alive. And I wish I could just bottle that up because it's so heartwarming, you know?
Absolutely. I think that once I finally had my diagnosis, it really changes your perspective on life. And I try to exuberate love to everyone that I encounter because life is so short and we are so blessed to be here and to live the life that we do have, whether it's rare or not.
Yep, agreed.
Well, I can't wait. We're going to bring Jax on for a little interview at another time. So I'm really looking forward to getting to meet Jax in the near future. So, going back to his diagnosis and next steps. So, you talked about a treatment for it, and that was blood
Mhm.
stem cells. So, tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, one of the ideas is that if a child or a boy, a male with IPEX is transplanted with a donor stem cells, that they would be able to sort of wipe out the code. They had described to me as, they would Jax is growing weeds and like in his blood stem cells, right? So it's weeds. We have to wipe out the weeds and give him a new fresh garden. But because that wasn't available, we really worked hard to try to find and diversify the donor drive. He actually did have three matches. and they all declined, which is actually the reality of
Wow.
when folks join the blood stem cell registry. Around 50% of people decline for whatever reason, right? It could be medical, it
Mhm,
could be a change of life, it could just be they signed up under, something that they were interested in then and they weren't now. But
mhm.
essentially, we're learning that maybe those blood stem cell transplants aren't exactly the right way to manage and treat IPEX at the root. And I say that because I think some families and some males still need a blood stem cell transplant depending on the severity of IPEX,
Sure.
because life IPEX is life threatening. You know, the males come and present in clinic in very different stages, and
Mhm.
some are very, very, very clinically ill. And that blood stem cell transplant is on the table to try to do something to save them.
Sure. And I think that's very common in the rare disease. There is a spectrum of it. I myself is mine is mild compared to some of my other friends and colleagues in the rare disease space. So I completely understand that spectrum. What qualifies as a match? Because you had mentioned that your son Lincoln only had a 25% chance or 25% match. So what qualifies as a match?
So when you register with the blood stem cell registry, you take this long stick that looks like a long Q-tip and you swab the sides of your cheek and then you turn it in. And they kind of it's like a string of your DNA. They match you to the T. And then if you match somebody, you go further on to do some blood work and some physicals to see if you're really truly a match. So it comes down to even things like, were you exposed to certain diseases? I mean, it is so intricate. And I know this side of it because of the work that we've done. I've actually been on phone calls where patients have gotten the call that they've been a match because they've signed up for Jax, but they've went on to save somebody else's life. And my own brother was a match for a female in Florida. It was down to the final two. The minutia of being a match is so incredibly, it's just so down to certain little markers that
Mhm.
is one marker was different. So they chose the other match. But what they said was just stay tuned because we might call you if this one doesn't work. And so it's pretty intricate in terms of them lining up lots and lots of data markers to see if you're a match.
Wow. And so once there is a match, what is the next step?
If you become a match, you will get a phone call that's saying, "Hey, great news, you're a match." And then they'll talk you through what that means. 90% of people, it becomes almost like a plasma draw. So it's over the
Mhm.
course of several hours. And what's really nice is NMDP, that's the national organization that holds the registry, right? They pay for everything because they don't want insurance or anything to stand in the way of saving a life. So everything is paid for, your meals, your travel, if that's necessary, all of it is paid for. And so the next step will be you'll get that phone call, you'll walk through what it would look like if you chose to donate. And then that very next step is they'll ask you to go get some blood work because that blood work will then match up with the patient or somebody who you're going to donate to see if it's still jiving, right? Because things
Mhm.
change with all of us on the regular. We're exposed to so many things that we don't even, that we don't realize, but that really makes a difference when you're talking about a blood stem cell transplant. So they'll go on to get a lab, and then if that continues to work, then the donor will move on to a physical and then some more blood labs, and if all of that pans out, then they create a date to talk about retrieving their stem cells for transplant. The coolest thing about the whole situation is if you become a donor, you can only donate twice in your life. Your stem cell donation is transported to the patient wherever they are within 24 hours. So they actually have their own couriers delivering
Wow.
the stem cell.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating.
Mhm.
So you've gotten through the first phase of this trial, but
Yes.
now you're moving on to phase two, which means there's funding needed.
Correct. Well, and that is just the blood stem cell that's just blood stem cell registry. And so while we're doing that, I've put registered over 7,000 people in Jax's honor. We've gone on to save multiple lives. But because Jax does not have a match, we have now partnered with Dr. Rosa Bacchetta. She does research out of Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. Her trial is different than the blood stem cell trial. And what her trial is taking these boys, these IPEX boys, and she takes their T regulatory cells. So there's this extraction of the T regulatory cells. She
Hmm.
genetically modifies them and then transplants them back. And the interesting thing, so the two, what makes them different is a blood stem cell transplant is a donor, a stranger donor, right? And you have to go through chemotherapy. Dr. Rosa's clinical trial is Jax's cells, genetically modified, no chemotherapy. So we've gone through phase 1 of that clinical trial. And yes, now that August 21st was his 1 year post genetically modified, he calls himself the genetically modified man. So we've made it to August 21st of Mr. Genetically Modified Man, and that ended his phase 1 clinical trial. So now we are in desperate need to get to phase 2. And there's a lot that goes with getting to phase 2.
Sure. You have created a foundation, a nonprofit 501c3, the IPEX Foundation, to help raise monies so that he can get further on in this clinical trial. Can you tell us a little bit more about the nonprofit?
Can. So the IPEX Foundation married Be the Match for Jax. And when I say that, I was operating Be the Match for Jax, and I was approached by an individual who wanted to really take the IPEX Foundation because it was living, but it wasn't breathing. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, listen, our passions align with IPEX, right? He's an IPEX patient. I have Jax, my IPEX son, and we have Be the Match for Jax, who is a very living and breathing, very known entity, at least in Pennsylvania and in some other parts of the United States. Let's marry them and do some great work. And so we decided to move forward with that. And the IPEX Foundation is really a resource for all of the families who have a loved one with IPEX because it's a very isolating and scary journey. And a lot of these families, there's only one working parent. They're struggling financially. They're afraid they're going to lose their son to IPEX. There's medication management. And so what we decided was we are going to be, again, the voice for not only Jax, but for those that need it. And we're trying to raise awareness about IPEX because we believe that there are more IPEX boys out there, and it may not be as rare. It's still going to be rare, but not as
Right,
rare
right.
because the four major markers of IPEX are type 1 diabetes and then some other autoimmune disorder like gut disease, so like Crohn's, things like that,
Hmm.
eczema, and allergies, or thyroid. And how
Hmm.
many people do we know that have two of those, right? And so
Right.
when you are walking around this earth and maybe you're just treating symptoms, we think there's more IPEX boys in this world is
Sure.
really the point. So we want to raise awareness, and the more awareness we raise, the more medical folks we can get on board because not a lot of medical professionals know or have heard of or have ever treated IPEX. And so there's a lot of patients across the United States and otherwise that have limited treatment because their medical providers don't know where to turn. And we're all doing all that, but we're also supporting the Stanford University clinical trial
Oh,
because
sure.
we believe that that is a route to a treatment for us that works.
Right, right. No, I completely understand. If somebody's interested in helping out, one of the things that they can do is join the blood stem cell registry. And one of the things you had mentioned, or you hadn't mentioned yet, you had shared with me that people can text Jax Ramirez PA to 61474. And what does that do?
So if somebody is interested, I always say if you want to be a walking hero, it's the one time in your life you can, you know, donate life and live to tell the tale. It's again that swab of the cheek. So you can do that in your home. Sometimes families have done it over Thanksgiving as they're part of like it's part of their holiday tradition. Anybody who hasn't joined the National Blood Stem Cell Registry and of course was able to, then they do that at Thanksgiving as almost like this like way of giving back and giving thanks, right?
Yeah.
So you can yeah, it's a very cool thing. I've sent lots and lots of swab kits, but if you just wanted to do it for yourself, all you have to do is text that pr- and a prompt will come back that you'll walk through with NMDP to kind of get on the registry. It's very easy. I am on the National Blood Stem Cell Registry. You can join up until the age of 40. Um, like you can join at 11:59 on your like right before your 41st birthday. Then you'll stay on that registry until you're 61 years old. And I know many people who have donated, and one of my very close friends' husbands has donated twice in his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you could register up to the age of 40. I know myself, I'm over that age, but because of my immune deficiency and some other rare diseases kept me from being able to be on that registry.
Yeah, and so it does ask you some basic medical questions, like, have you ever had a transplant before? That will take you right off the list. Or if you have, like, an autoimmune disorder, and some of them are just other mostly people make it through there because when I go out and canvas, we help a lot of people walk through. You can toggle in between Spanish and English. There's just a lot of we try to make it as easy as possible for folks to register.
Well, this has been very opening and informative. If somebody is interested in participating in any of your fundraisers or getting involved to volunteer with your foundation, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
That's a great question. If they go to the IPEX Foundation website, they're going to get me. So they're going to send an email and it comes right to me and my partner. So I answer all of those. But if they wanted to follow on our social platforms, Be the Match for Jax on Facebook and Instagram, or Jax's Mama or Jax Needs a Hero on TikTok, again, they'll get me. And I've walked many a person through that journey, and I've walked many a family through the IPEX journey because on TikTok and on Instagram, I get a lot of moms reaching out saying, I never thought I'd meet another mom whose son has IPEX. We're really struggling, or I lost my son to IPEX and I'm watching your journey because I wish we had this when my son was sick. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of love happening in these private chats in on these social platforms that I think most people wouldn't realize with this disease journey.
Right. Well, and that's actually one of the ways that you and I connected was on TikTok. I came across one of your stories and I knew instantly that I needed to reach out and connect with you.
I'm so happy that you did.
Well, I will make sure that all of your contact information, how to connect, etc., is shared in the comments and the description of the podcast for viewers so they can just click on a link or look it up and have everything in writing.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Well, thank you so much, Missy, for your time. It's been a wonderful experience to spend this time with you. And I hope that our audience has felt inspired and learned a lot about our inspirations behind the legacies that we both lead. And today's message goes to show that true beauty begins within. And when you're aligned with your soul, your outer crown simply reflects your inner life. So, thank you again for tuning in to the Royal Bus. And if you would like to be a guest or if any of this resonates with you, you can go to my website at creative, that's CRE, the number 8, TIVEHQ for headquarters.com. And that's where you can reserve or register for any live events or to be a guest on the show. So thanks again for tuning in to the Royal Buzz, where you'll discover inspiring stories, empowering discussions, and a whole lot of positivity.